You're listening to the E-commerce Impact Podcast, where we share the latest marketing strategies to grow your e-com store and have more impact. Hey, Lauren, welcome along to the podcast.
Great. Thank you for having me, Jessie. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this episode. So my first question to you is, for people just getting started working with, well, let's call it UGC, user-generated content. Well, first and foremost, how do we define that in today's world?
Yeah. Influencers are usually people who have very large followings and require more money. They, post to their channel. They essentially kind of go off of their aesthetic. And so they take the product, but basically put it into their aesthetic to, in fact, run ads or run the content through their channels. Whereas content creation in UGC is you're getting a brief from the brand and you're working off of what you need to shoot. So it's still, it still has that user generated quality feel. Same with content creation. So it's more brand focused as opposed to influencer focused. So I think there's, again, everything is paid still, but there's just different ways of how you kind of position those different creations.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So, and I think there is a lot of confusion in our world about this. So yeah, an influencer, you're really paying for their audience and for them to influence their audience and put your products into their world and show people how they can use them. Whereas when you're paying for UGC or creator content, you're actually, you probably have a little bit more say in the creative process as well, but you're not expecting to get an audience from that. They might not even have an audience. They might just be someone who's really good at creating video, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Awesome. I guess as well where the confusion is as well is back in the day, user-generated content is purely content from your audience or from your customers. So I think sometimes brands get stuck when they think that they have to get this content, organically from their customers. And I would say that's definitely not the case. There's a lot of ways you can get content now as a brand without having to wait till your customers get around to filming a testimonial, right? So do you want to talk to us a little bit about how you're working with creators and what your process looks like?
Yeah, so we've actually been sourcing creators for the last year and a half actually. And essentially what we've done is I've really looked at people again, kind of on, I guess, the micro side. So they don't necessarily have a huge following, but in terms of being in front of the camera, they're very natural. They can talk to their audience, whether it's stories or reels, in a very authentic way. And so really what we've done is we've kind of searched high and low for the creators that we work with, but basically have just kind of worked with them in terms of, you're really great at talking about different areas of your life, talking about products, talking about things that you're passionate about, but working with them in a sense of, we also need this to convert someone to actually purchase an item. So I think what we've been doing is we've kind of been training them to, mold them into exactly what we need in order to have paid ads work. And again, because they're so natural in front of the camera, it's really easy for us to coach them in terms of, okay, well, we need this shot, but we need it with, this hook or this, ending or whatever. And basically, this is the B-roll we need from you as well. So having them piece together each part of that content will then help us obviously craft the ads. So we, have really kind of worked with a lot of creators and have found creators who work really well with us and who we've been able to kind of train to execute on the creatives that we need for our clients.
Amazing. So what sort of numbers are we talking here? You have is it 10 or 20 creators that you're regularly working with for different brands?
Yeah, so right now we have 30 creators who we're working with, and that's male and female. And then really just seeing how they work with the brands, how they work with us. And then if we can get them kind of going on a steady cadence, then, we're able to kind of transition them into, I guess a full-time role working with us, where we can, obviously give them the direction and give them the product that we need in order to shoot the products.
Amazing. So having that smallish group of creators, does that mean that, as a consumer of ads on, on Meta or TikTok, am I going to see the same creators across different brands? Or do you think there's enough, people don't notice that? Or,
it's funny. I'm sure people do notice it because I notice it. I've worked with, some brands, and I tend to see a lot of the same creators coming from a Billow or an Incense. There's definitely favorites, I feel because I've definitely seen the same creators that have come from all of those platforms. But Honestly, I mean, I feel like it's kind of the nature of the business now. I mean, no matter where you are, there's so many creators out there. There's so many people shooting content that it's bound to happen, you know? And I think even too within the e-commerce space, the direct to consumer space, people kind of find those people that work really well and who do a really good job at selling the product, that they're naturally going to gravitate towards those people to work with them for content creation.
I think I agree that it's fine. Like, I think, because in a way they're sort of in that world of like, so if me as a consumer saw them, you know, talking about a couple of different products, well, they're kind of like a micro influencer in a way, even though the channel they're reaching me through is paid. So there's someone who, you know, likes this coffee and also likes this supplement. Like, as long as the
Right.
products make sense for the persona that they're putting out, and they're not dressing up as like a granny one day and a like muscle man the next, it's like it's probably fine. And what about like the legal side of things? How are you guys? Are these creators giving you the right to the content in perpetuity for a year, 2 years? How do you work on that side of it?
Yeah, so some of our creators, we do have contracts with them where we have a certain amount of time that we can actually run ads with them.
Hmm.
And then some of our creators, basically like it's in perpetuity. So we can give them, once the assets are ours, they're ours. I think it kind of depends on the level of experience too. I've worked with a lot of creators who have more experience in creating content that they've learned a lot along the way and will eventually just, start asking you for, payment terms, whitelisting access, all that kind of stuff, where it is obviously you're paying a little bit more, but you know the type of content that you're going to get. Whereas some of the smaller influencers or creators who aren't, as big, they don't necessarily have all those guidelines intact yet, but yet they're still learning, they're still wanting to work with new brands and grow.
I think probably 2 years would be enough for a typical ad, but would be nice to just be able to know that you can run the ad forever.
Right.
But it's unlikely that it's still gonna be useful to you in 2 years' time. And I'm fascinated what sort of people these are. Are they like, do they tend to be people who are aspiring to make this a full-time thing, or is it often something where they are studying or they are pursuing some kind of other passion? Like what's the typical kind of profile of these people?
Yeah, a lot of the people that we work with currently are mostly aspiring to do this full time. So
Yeah.
they're trying to build up their clients. And so really like working with us, because we work with so many different brands and agencies, that it's good for them to essentially put that into their portfolio of, here's so many diverse products that I can work off of.
Amazing. And would they have come from like an acting background typically, or would they have come from like it's just a mix of people?
It's honestly a mix of people. We have some who have done acting and some who have literally never gotten in front of a camera to shoot content like this. It's
Yeah.
mostly just been them shooting their own reels and stories. And again, they just have really natural abilities to speak in front of a camera. And so that has really just helped them, honestly, to flourish.
Yeah. So what would you say are the key skills you're looking for?
Camera ability, speaking ability, aesthetic wise. So how they actually, how their videos are actually being shot. There are different ways aesthetically of what looks nice on camera in terms of reels and stories and ads. And so if they are shooting, in obviously very dark places, if they're not understanding where their lighting is coming from, that's a huge part of it.
Interesting. And what about like, so would you typically would the creator be the person that edits the whole piece of content, or would they give you kind of rough cuts and you guys would, or you or the brand would tighten it up?
Yeah, so we take all of the content and we cut it for ourselves. So they give us all the raw footage and then we will edit all of the footage to cut them into ads.
Right. That's interesting. Okay, awesome. So you guys are, as part of your service, you're sort of coming up with the storyboard or the kind of outline and you're giving them the shot list basically and getting them to pull that together. Is that generally
Exactly.
how you work?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll give them a full brief with shots that we need and copy or voiceovers that they need to supply to us so that we can edit the content for the ads that we need to create.
Awesome. Cool. That makes sense. So you guys are basically the creative, you tend to be the creative powerhouse behind like what is the hook, what is the angle, what are we trying to get across here, what is the message? And then
Exactly.
these guys are filming and executing on that brief. Awesome.
Right.
Yeah. Have you, and I guess you've got to the point of doing it that way for a reason. Have you ever, like, because I know sometimes brands will try and get the creator to just kind of come up with the whole thing. Have you found that doesn't really work very well?
Yes and no. I think Depending on who you're working with, if they've been shooting content for brands for a while, I think the more experienced creators understand an ad and how it should look and what, how the ad should be portrayed.
Yeah.
Whereas the people who are still kind of learning definitely need more help with it. I mean, they don't necessarily understand the paid side of things and how, performance creative works. So
Yeah.
while they're really great at getting us the shots, they're just not really good at piecing that story together.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. So how important is it to build kind of like a relationship with these creators, like versus just, getting new creators to work with all the time?
So I think the biggest thing for us is that we really do try to work with our creators, long term and work with them on a consistent basis. Because again, I think the biggest thing is that the more that we work with them, the better they're starting to progress in terms of their creatives. And it's easy to just know, okay, this person does a really great job at skincare, let's say. I know I can give them all of our skincare brands and they're going to execute it, perfectly. And there's not going to be too many edits or revisions. And so it's like as you kind of start to build up that library of creators, then it's easy to just kind of give them the content, have them shoot it, and then, kind of cycle through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's good to know. Like, I think either a brand needs to have like someone like you supporting them and doing that and building that relationship, or they need to build those relationships themselves. And I guess it depends on the size of the brand, right?
Right.
What are the pros and cons as far as you see of like using an expert like yourself versus like a brand trying to execute this themselves in-house?
I think again, if you're going to execute this in-house, I would say you definitely need to have a creative strategist who understands how to create the brief for the creators, how to gather the content, how to basically put the ads together in terms of visually what they're thinking and how they're going to explain that to the editor. So I think a lot of times brands will just, they'll kind of look at it as, oh, well, I have a video editor or I have, someone who does social. They're going to understand how to make these creatives for paid performance, where they potentially could know how to do it for paid performance. Working with us, I mean, again, we do this every day. We work with a lot of different brands. And so it's easy for us to, come to us and say, hey, this is what we want to portray. This is what we want to talk about. You can, storyboard it, cut the ad, and then you're good to go. It kind of takes out that guesswork of, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? Like, how much coaching do I need to do? There's just a lot of less back and forth and more just, this is what you're essentially going to get.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so we've talked a lot about like the nitty-gritty of like making this happen. Yeah, the kind of the technicalities of working with creators. Let's change tack a little bit and talk about like what is working right now in kind of UGC creative or creator generated creative. What kind of formats or creative angles and hooks are working well on both TikTok and Meta, and also what's the difference between those two platforms?
What we've seen work on the platforms is a lot of things that are trending on TikTok will translate to Facebook. So kind of the, 3 reasons why, what I ordered versus what I got, things like a green screen, things like that. A lot of that is already trending on TikTok. That is working obviously really well on Facebook. So I think the trends that we've been seeing is anything that looks native to the platform in terms of UGC, not an ad, is always going to work better than things that are very scripted, looks like it's been, looks like an ad essentially. And that's, that's hard to do. Like, you're trying to sell a product, so it has to still look like an ad. But then at the same time, like, you don't want it to look like an ad. You want it to look as organic as possible. I think it's just how we've been kind of positioning it is just making sure that we're just trying to make it as authentic as possible with drawing you in with a hook.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you, when you're working with a brand, do you have kind of like a whole lot of go-to hooks that you kind of have up your sleeve, or are you kind of starting fresh with each brand and coming up with a new creative idea? Like, I mean, I'm someone who is a little too addicted to TikTok. I'm always trying to like get away. I managed to not look at it yesterday, for instance. If I go a day without looking at it, then that's a good day. But like, it definitely does fire up ideas for me. Like when I'm in there, and I love seeing what brands are doing. So yeah, what does your creative process look like for coming up with those ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things do stick really well. 3 reasons why, 5 reasons why, that always does really well. Same thing, green screen always does really well. What I ordered versus what I got. Those kind of tend to be the starting point of what we kind of go off of in terms of UGC, because those concepts always work. The TikTok question bubble, again, those are really good ones to kind of go off of, because again, it introduces the product instantly, and then it's a quick cut onto, this is the problem, this is the solution. We can see where the audience kind of goes from there, and then we can basically pivot to start testing new concepts, new hooks, really trying to engage people more in terms of entertainment value, especially on TikTok. I mean, that's kind of, TikTok is an entertainment platform. So
Yeah.
making sure that we're trying to find those hooks that are obviously going to entertain and engage.
I see a lot more humor coming in even to Facebook ads since TikTok's been around, I think. Like,
Yeah.
I've been looking at Dr. Squatch's ads over the last couple of days, and they're so funny. Like, they're just silly, but it's kind of like a little bit like those Old Spice ads, but for the TikTok generation. Like,
Yeah.
the way they imply that basically you use this like little bit of this little hunk of soap, and then girls are gonna want to sleep with you.
Yeah.
Really, we know that's not true, but it somehow kind of works because it's funny.
Yeah.
But some of their hooks are crazy. Like, they've got one hook that is, like your balls smell bad.
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow, that's definitely the 3-second hook being utilized to full advantage there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find it fun to break them down. Okay, and what do you see coming, like, in the next kind of, I don't even want to talk about 6 months because it's moving so fast, right? But what do you think are the trends coming up in the next couple of months on like TikTok, Meta, in terms of creative, and like what's kind of hot right now?
I mean, again, I think it's only going to get more interesting with hooks. I think like hooks are just, people are always trying to outdo each other on the hook side of things. So I think those are just going to continue to get stronger. And that's something that even I've noticed in terms of, what's been happening on our accounts, is that we're always trying to outbeat our hook and always trying to outbeat ourselves in terms of how we're going to make it better. I mean, I definitely see that kind of coming down on the horizon. I do think also, though, that, people are starting to realize again that statics are super important. I've, been seeing a huge uptick again in statics. So I think something like that, again, is, statics are always going to be a winner, but I've definitely been seeing those trending really well right now too.
Yeah. So how do statics and UGC play together? Would it be images created by creators, or are we just talking about brand, lifestyle images, that kind of thing for static?
I think it's both, honestly. We've been seeing a really good return in terms of statics with UGC create. So we've been doing a lot of UGC carousels that have just been static carousels, and those have actually been performing really well. So branded and UGC has actually been doing really well. So I think it's a mixture of both, honestly.
Interesting. Well, obviously that still has a place, but I can see how the mashup is really effective because it like puts everything into one ad.
Yeah.
So it has best chance of performing. Yeah. That's interesting. And what else can we ask here? Do you want to like these questions about enhancing your product brand with creative strategy? Should I ask something about that? Or do you think we've talked about that mostly?
Yeah, I think we've talked about that mostly. I mean, you basically have to have that within the brand. So I don't necessarily know if we have to go into that.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the difference between organic and paid creative. Cool. So, and you also help brands with getting creative for their organic channels. What do you think is the difference between organic creative and paid creative? Like, would you use the same creative in both places, or would you create different creative depending on where it's being used?
Yeah, so the creative that we use with our organic clients is, again, we're still trying to sell a product or trying to sell a service, but we talk about it obviously in a different way. It's coming from the brand side. It's not coming from a creator or testimonial or a consumer facing side. It's coming from the brand. So essentially how we differentiate that is that, it's the brand talking to you in a very authentic, organic way of, why you should purchase this, how it benefits your life, why people are using their product, why people love them. In terms of paid, where it's, you want to talk to the consumer again on not necessarily all from the brand side, but, coming from consumer testimonials, creators who are talking about the product, why they love it. So I think it's just a different side of how you're approaching it. I mean, again, at the end of the day, you're still trying to sell your product, but it's just the tone of voice and how you're talking about it, I think, is how you can think about paid and organic.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And so if it's organic, if a brand a brand could still potentially use creators to create content for their organic channels, like to talk about, say it's apparel, to talk about the hoodie or whatever. But is
Right.
it more like sort of behind the scenes or kind of on behalf of the brand is what you're saying, more from the customer point of view?
So we do use a lot of our creators to shoot content, but again, the storyline is different. It's talking about all of the pros of the brand, why this is a good, basically just making it again from brand tone of voice, not necessarily from like my tone of voice. So
Yeah.
it's different in that sense. So again,
Mm-hmm.
the creative is still effective in that it's coming from a person who's, like sharing the content, but it's not, I don't think it comes across as salesy as maybe like a direct response ad could come across.
Yeah, that's right. And final question for you, where are you sourcing these creators? Like, where are they hanging out? There's obviously lots of different platforms that you can kind of hire a creator fairly cheap, but do you think that's an effective way to reach them, or are you finding them hanging out somewhere else?
I mean, I found a lot of my creators actually from like word of mouth. Twitter has been huge. I found a lot of creators on Twitter. Actually, I would say Twitter is probably the biggest one. There's so many creators on the platform. And I mean, truthfully, you can kind of just drop a post and, people will see it. So I have seen a lot of creators through Twitter, and then really just, again, kind of people who I followed, kind of following them through.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it's not easy, right? That's definitely, you have to put in the hard yards to find the right creators for the brand and that you can trust and rely on and that are going to like fulfill the brief and not let you down. And I can imagine it's a little bit like herding cats at times.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And I guess that's why often brands kind of shy away from it or wonder how to approach it because it is so time consuming, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. And where can people find you, follow you, keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, so my website is theloft325.com. And then obviously I'm on Twitter at loft325 and Instagram at theloft325.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we link those in the show notes and make sure everyone can find you. And thank you so much for coming along.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us here on the E-commerce Impact Podcast. If I can ask you one favor, can you please make sure you subscribe? And if you can, leave us a review. It helps us have a much bigger impact with what we're trying to do here at the E-commerce Impact Podcast. Now, if you're ready to take your e-com store to the next level, then go to www.ecommerceimpactpodcast.com and click on the button to book a strategy call with me or my team. We offer a free audit of your advertising and a custom growth plan, so you really have nothing to lose by getting in touch and jumping on a call with us. See you soon and watch out for the next episode in 2 weeks' time.